The moving stones of Death Valley, you say. Have you ever heard of a place where rocks move on their own, leaving long trails behind them as if they were alive? It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it's real, and it happens in one of the hottest, driest, and strangest landscapes in the world, Death Valley in the United States. Death Valley is already famous for its extreme heat, endless stretches of desert, and eerie silence, but hidden within it is a flat, cracked piece of land called the Racetrack Playa, and it is here that the mysterious moving stones perform their quiet, unexplained journey. Imagine standing on this dry lake bed and seeing a heavy rock, some as small as a pebble and others weighing hundreds of pounds, sitting on the surface. Behind it, stretching for meters, is a trail carved neatly into the earth, like a scar across the desert floor. You look around. No one has touched it, no animals are nearby, no wind strong enough to shove something that heavy, yet the rock has clearly moved. It looks as though it slid gracefully across the ground, leaving a path that whispers a story of its travels. And the strangest part, the stones don't move when you're watching. Their journeys happen in secret, leaving only their mysterious trails behind. For decades, people wondered how this was possible. Some believed the desert was haunted, that invisible spirits were dragging the rocks across the playa in the stillness of night. Others whispered about supernatural forces or even aliens at work. After all, how could something so heavy and solid move without help? Theories grew, filled with mystery and imagination, and each trail across the desert floor only deepened the questions. But the desert doesn't easily reveal its secrets. Scientists spent years trying to solve this mystery, visiting again and again, setting up cameras and instruments, waiting patiently for the desert to give up its truth, and slowly, piece by piece, an answer began to appear. It turns out that during rare winter nights, a thin sheet of ice can form over the playa. When the morning sun warms the desert, the ice begins to break apart into large floating panels. As these panels shift, pushed gently by light winds, they nudge the rocks along the slippery wet mud beneath. The rocks, freed by just the right mix of water, ice, and breeze, begin to glide slowly, almost silently, across the desert floor. When the ice melts completely and the mud dries once more, only the trails remain, like signatures of the stone's hidden dance. Isn't it amazing how something so mysterious can be explained by nature itself? Yet even knowing the science, there is still something magical about it. Because the desert doesn't let you witness the movement directly, it only shows you the evidence after it has happened, as though the earth is keeping its performance private. The stones move only when everything aligns perfectly. Old nights, freezing water, the right wind, and the patient stillness of the playa. It's a reminder that nature has rhythms we cannot control, and sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when no one is watching. The moving stones of Death Valley teach us about curiosity, patience, and wonder. They remind us that not all mysteries are meant to frighten us. Some are meant to inspire us to look closer, to pay attention, and to ask questions about the world around us. In their silent journeys, these rocks carry the voice of the desert itself, quiet, steady, and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. The Racetrack Playa in Death Valley is one of the most extraordinary natural settings in the world, and it is here that the mysterious phenomenon of the moving stones takes place. This dry lake bed, stretching wide under the scorching sun, looks barren and empty at first glance, but it hides a secret that has puzzled scientists, travelers, and dreamers for generations. On the cracked, dusty floor of the playa, heavy stones, some small enough to hold in your hands and others weighing hundreds of pounds, seem to move entirely on their own, gliding across the surface and leaving long trails behind them. These trails are not faint or accidental marks, but clear, deliberate-looking lines that stretch for meters, sometimes curving, sometimes straight, and each one tells the story of a stone's silent journey across the desert floor. Standing in such a place, surrounded by nothing but dry earth and distant mountains, the sight of these trails feels both eerie and enchanting, as though the desert itself is alive and whispering secrets that no one can fully understand when someone first sees the Racetrack Playa. The harshness of the environment is overwhelming. The sun beats down with an almost unbearable intensity, and the ground is dry, cracked, and lifeless. Yet scattered across this surface are stones that should have been motionless, and their perfectly etched tracks across the playa create a mystery that seems out of place in such a barren land. The stones are not all the same size or shape, and each has its own unique path, as though each stone has chosen a different destination. Some trails run parallel for long stretches, suggesting a shared movement before one suddenly curves away, leaving the other behind. Others show sharp turns, wide arcs, or long, straight lines that seem too precise to be random. These trails remain visible for years until wind and rain eventually erase them. But in that time, they serve as proof that something remarkable has happened in the quiet of the desert. The idea of rocks moving by themselves goes against everything we think we know about the natural world. Rocks are symbols of stillness and permanence, and yet here they seem to defy that very identity. People have long been drawn to this mystery, trying to understand how something so solid and heavy could shift without help. Some stones are as large as boulders, weighing hundreds of pounds, and it is almost impossible to imagine them moving without the force of machines, animals, or people. Yet the tracks are undeniably there, showing that they have crossed the playa with no visible cause. The sheer impossibility of the sight is what makes it so captivating, because it suggests that even the most ordinary objects, like stones, can surprise us when placed in extraordinary conditions. What makes the phenomenon even more intriguing is the way it happens unseen. No one has ever stood and watched a rock move before their eyes. Instead, the stones shift when no one is there to witness it, often at night or during rare weather events, and by the time someone returns, a new trail has appeared, silently etched into the surface. This secrecy adds a layer of wonder and mystery, as if the desert is guarding its secret, allowing only the traces of the movement to be observed while keeping the act itself hidden. The idea of nature performing in silence, beyond human observation, gives the Racetrack Playa an atmosphere unlike any other. Visitors stand among the stones and their trails, feeling as though they are in a place where the ordinary rules of the world have been suspended, and where something inexplicable still lingers in the open air. The Racetrack Playa's moving stones have become a symbol of curiosity and the human need to ask questions about the world around us. They remind us that nature often holds surprises, and even in places that seem empty or lifeless, extraordinary events can unfold. The stones glide across the desert floor with no audience, no fanfare, and no explanation offered in the moment. Yet the marks they leave behind inspire wonder in everyone who sees them. It is this quiet blend of simplicity and mystery that makes the moving stones one of the most fascinating natural phenomena on Earth. And it all begins with this place, the dry, cracked expanse of Death Valley, where rocks, against all expectations, are not as motionless as they appear. For many years, the moving stones of Death Valley inspired stories and legends that stretched far beyond the desert itself. Before modern science offered explanations, these stones were the source of endless curiosity, mystery, and sometimes fear. People who visited the Racetrack Playa would see the long trails carved into the dry lake bed and immediately wonder what force could possibly push something so heavy across flat, barren ground. Without obvious causes like machinery, animals, or even a strong wind, the mind naturally turned to the unknown, and countless theories began to emerge. Some suggested that supernatural forces were at work, that spirits or ghosts were moving the stones for reasons beyond human understanding. Others believed in extraterrestrial involvement, imagining that alien visitors had visited the desert and left evidence of their activity in the form of these trails. These ideas captured the imagination of many, transforming the stones from simple rocks into icons of mystery and adventure. The fascination with the moving stones grew as reports spread. Photographs of the trails would appear in books, newspapers, and travel magazines, each one showing rocks in the middle of the playa with perfectly straight or curving paths behind them. Readers and travelers alike were captivated. The notion that the desert, which seemed so still and lifeless during the day, could be the stage for something so inexplicable at night created a sense of awe and wonder. People began to see the stones as not merely physical objects, but as storytellers, leaving behind evidence of events that no human had witnessed. In a way, the Racetrack Playa became a silent theater where rocks were the performers and their trails were the script, telling a story of motion, mystery, and patience. The desert itself seemed alive, quietly orchestrating movements that defied the laws of expectation and challenged the mind to imagine what could be possible when no one is looking over time. Different explanations gained popularity, and the debate between the mystical and the scientific grew. Some theorists believed that magnetic fields or unseen forces of the earth could cause the stones to move. Others proposed that hidden underground currents of water were shifting the rocks, creating paths as they rolled across the mud. Every new idea sparked more curiosity, drawing scientists, adventurers, and dreamers alike to the Racetrack Playa, hoping to witness the inexplicable phenomenon firsthand. Each visitor approached the mystery with a sense of anticipation, standing on the cracked surface and imagining the stones' secret lives, wondering how much of the story the desert had chosen to share and how much remained hidden. The mystery created an emotional connection between the human observer and the natural world, turning a simple observation of moving stones into an experience of wonder, excitement, and sometimes frustration at the inability to fully grasp the cause. The mystery of the moving stones is also a reminder of the human love for exploration and problem solving. Over decades, scientists have returned to the playa repeatedly, measuring, recording, and studying, determined to uncover the truth. Cameras were set up to capture the stones' movements over days and months, and meteorological data was collected to understand the conditions of the desert. Yet despite all this effort, for a long time, the phenomenon resisted explanation. The stones continued to move silently, leaving trails that puzzled even the most dedicated researchers. In this way, the mystery of the moving stones encouraged perseverance, patience, and careful observation, teaching that not every question has an immediate answer and that sometimes the thrill lies in the journey toward understanding rather than the discovery itself. The legend and the mystery of the moving stones have inspired countless stories, artworks, and personal reflections. Writers have imagined ghostly forces sliding the rocks across the desert floor. Poets have compared the trails to life paths marked by unseen hands, and travelers have marveled at the beauty of such a quiet, secret movement. The moving stones became a symbol not only of natural wonder, but also of human imagination, showing how a single phenomenon could bridge the gap between science and storytelling. They remind us that mystery is not always a void to be filled, but a space where curiosity, creativity, and discovery can coexist, creating moments of reflection and awe that endure long after leaving the desert. Even today, the moving stones of Death Valley capture attention in ways that are both scientific and poetic. They encourage questions about the world and our place within it, inspiring people to consider the forces that shape the planet in ways they may never directly witness. The mystery invites visitors to slow down, to look closely at the ground beneath their feet, and to consider that nature has rhythms and secrets far beyond immediate perception. In the Racetrack Playa, the stones continue their journeys, moving when conditions allow, leaving behind trails that fuel the imagination and challenge the mind, and reminding everyone who visits that the world is filled with enigmas waiting to be explored. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand the mystery of the moving stones in Death Valley, and over time, their investigations have revealed a remarkable story about nature's hidden forces. For years, these rocks were thought to defy all logic, gliding across the dry lake bed without any visible help. Visitors to the racetrack Playa would marvel at the long trails etched into the cracked mud, wondering what invisible hand could possibly move stones that weighed hundreds of pounds. The mystery attracted researchers from multiple fields, including geology, meteorology, and physics, all eager to uncover the mechanisms behind this strange phenomenon. Each expedition brought new tools, careful measurements, and endless patience, because unlike many natural events, the stones moved only under very specific conditions, and at times when no human was present to witness it. Early scientific studies involved detailed mapping of the Playa's surface, tracking every rock, its size, and the orientation of its trail. Researchers wanted to understand whether certain stones were more likely to move than others, whether slope or surface texture played a role, or whether hidden forces such as magnetism might be involved. Instruments were placed to record temperature, wind speed, and humidity, aiming to detect patterns that could explain the motion. At first, the evidence seemed contradictory, and theories were often speculative. Some suggested that strong gusts of wind alone could push the rocks across the slick surface, while others argued that the desert's dry crust would be far too rough for wind to have any meaningful effect. As data accumulated, it became clear that no single factor could fully account for the movements. Instead, it was the rare combination of elements working together that allowed the stones to glide. One of the key breakthroughs came from understanding the Playa's water and ice conditions. During winter, a thin layer of water can accumulate across the flat surface, sometimes freezing overnight in the cold desert temperatures. When sunlight warms the ice the following day, large panels begin to break apart and shift slightly. These ice sheets act as a natural sliding surface, reducing friction and allowing the rocks to move even under gentle nudges from wind. It is a delicate process, requiring precise alignment of temperature, water, ice, and wind. Too little water and the mud is too dry for sliding, too much ice and the stones are trapped. The interplay between these factors explains why movement is rare, unpredictable, and often invisible to observers. Scientists began setting up time-lapse cameras to capture the rocks in motion, hoping to witness the phenomenon firsthand. After years of careful observation, researchers finally caught evidence of the stones moving. The cameras showed that even light winds, when combined with floating ice panels, could nudge the rocks gently across the wet, slippery mud. The stones slid slowly, sometimes moving only a few inches at a time, but over hours or days they created the long trails that had puzzled humans for decades. The process is quiet, almost imperceptible, yet its results are dramatic. The tracks remain clearly visible long after the stones have moved, offering a record of motion that occurs almost like a secret performance. This discovery was celebrated not just for solving a long-standing puzzle, but also for demonstrating the complexity and subtlety of natural forces in an environment that seems, at first glance, lifeless and harsh. Even with this understanding, the moving stones retain an aura of magic and mystery. Watching a flat desert floor covered with stationary rocks gives little hint that a hidden dance occurs when conditions align perfectly. It reminds us that nature has rhythms, patterns, and surprises that often escape immediate observation. The stones' journeys are slow, patient, and deliberate, carried out under conditions that humans rarely witness. They highlight the power of observation, careful measurement, and persistence in scientific inquiry, showing that mysteries are not always supernatural. They often have explanations that are just as astonishing and elegant as any legend. The study of these moving stones has also inspired broader scientific curiosity. Geologists, meteorologists, and ecologists have used the racetrack Playa as a natural laboratory, learning not only about rock movement but also about desert processes, ice formation, and soil dynamics. The phenomenon underscores how interconnected natural elements are, and how even small changes in environment, temperature, and moisture can produce remarkable results. It demonstrates that careful study of seemingly simple occurrences can yield insights into larger systems, encouraging curiosity and patience for anyone who seeks to understand the natural world through the work of scientists. The moving stones of Death Valley have transformed from a puzzle steeped in superstition into a fascinating example of natural mechanics. Yet the desert retains its quiet magic, revealing only the trails and not the movement itself. Each stone that glides across the playa carries a story of ice, water, wind, and patience, reminding everyone who studies or observes them that nature has its own rhythms and secrets. These stones teach us to watch carefully, to respect the environment, and to embrace the wonder that comes from discovering how the world quietly moves all around us. The moving stones of Death Valley remain one of the most fascinating and enigmatic natural phenomena in the world, capturing the imagination of anyone who hears their story. The Racetrack Playa, a flat, dry lake bed in the heart of Death Valley, is the stage for this quiet, mysterious dance. What makes these stones so remarkable is that they appear to move entirely on their own, leaving long trails behind them that trace their journey across the cracked and sun-baked surface. The trails are often straight, sometimes curved, and sometimes meandering, each one telling a story that no one has witnessed directly. This aspect of secrecy adds to the magic of the phenomenon, making it feel as though the desert itself holds a private performance that only the ground can remember. Visitors to the playa are often struck by the surreal quality of the landscape. The flat expanse stretches endlessly in all directions, surrounded by distant mountains and ridges, giving the impression of a world apart from ordinary life. The surface of the playa is hard, dry, and cracked, dotted with stones of all shapes and sizes. Some are tiny pebbles, while others are massive boulders that weigh hundreds of pounds. Despite their weight, these rocks manage to shift across the surface under the right conditions, carving distinct trails that remain long after the stones themselves have moved on. The fact that these movements are almost never seen first and makes them even more mysterious and compelling. Standing among these stones and trails, one feels a sense of quiet wonder, as though the desert is alive with hidden forces that play out their stories in silence for decades. The mystery inspired countless explanations, ranging from the mystical to the scientific. Before researchers understood the natural mechanisms, people imagined that spirits, ghosts, or even extraterrestrial beings were responsible for the stone's movements. These ideas captured the human imagination and turned the playa into a place of legend. People were fascinated by the idea that a simple rock, an object so ordinary and solid, could carry such an air of mystery. The lack of direct observation added to this fascination, because the stones only move when no one is watching, leaving their paths behind as evidence of events that remain hidden from view. It is this secrecy that transforms a simple desert into a place of wonder, where the ordinary laws of nature seem to be suspended in the quiet of the playa. As scientists became involved, the focus shifted from superstition to observation and experimentation. Detailed studies of the playa's surface, temperature, wind, and ice conditions revealed that the movement of the stones is influenced by rare combinations of environmental factors. During winter, a thin layer of water can form on the playa, which sometimes freezes into sheets of ice overnight. When the ice begins to break apart in the morning sun, it can float across the surface, nudged by even gentle breezes. Rocks trapped within these ice panels are slowly carried along the wet, slippery mud, creating the trails that have puzzled humans for generations. The process is subtle and requires precise alignment of ice, water, wind, and the desert floor, which is why it occurs so infrequently and unpredictably. Even with modern technology, capturing the moment of movement remains a challenge, adding to the sense of mystery surrounding the phenomenon. The trails left by the stones are remarkable in themselves. They vary in length, depth, and pattern depending on the size of the stone, the slope of the surface, and the direction of the ice and wind. Some trails are perfectly straight, suggesting a steady glide across the surface, while others curve or zigzag, showing changes in direction over time. These tracks are lasting evidence of movement, even when the stones themselves are no longer in motion. Observing these trails allows visitors and researchers alike to imagine the journey of each rock, to reconstruct the invisible forces that pushed it along, and to appreciate the delicate balance of nature that made the movement possible. The trails are like footprints of a hidden dance, a visual record of a quiet and secret performance beyond their scientific interest. The moving stones carry a sense of wonder and inspiration. They remind us that nature is full of surprises, and that even in harsh, barren environments, extraordinary phenomena can occur. They encourage curiosity, patience, and observation, showing that some of the most remarkable events happen slowly, quietly, and often out of sight. The Racetrack Playa teaches that mysteries are not always meant to frighten us or defy explanation. Sometimes they invite us to look closer, to ask questions, and to marvel at the complexity and beauty of the world around us. The moving stones serve as a testament to the power of nature's hidden forces and the quiet magic that exists in places where few people venture, where rocks can glide across the desert floor and leave behind trails that tell a story of wonder and mystery. The moving stones of Death Valley are more than just a scientific curiosity. They are a symbol of nature's subtle, quiet wonders, capturing the imagination of anyone who learns about them. The Racetrack Playa, a vast, flat expanse of dry lake bed, is where this phenomenon takes place, and it has become one of the most intriguing landscapes in the world. At first glance, the playa appears lifeless, barren, and unremarkable. The cracked earth stretches for miles under the scorching sun, and scattered across the surface are rocks of all shapes and sizes, lying seemingly motionless. But upon closer observation, something extraordinary reveals itself. Long, winding trails behind many of these stones, carved into the mud, showing that they have moved across the surface without any apparent force. These trails are often straight, sometimes curved, and occasionally zigzag, creating a map of the stone's secret journeys across the desert floor. The mystery of how such heavy rocks could move without visible help fascinated people for decades. Visitors to the Racetrack Playa would stare in awe at the trails, puzzled by the movement that seemed impossible. The stones range from small pebbles to massive boulders weighing hundreds of pounds, and yet each of them left a trail behind, as though they had been gently nudged along by invisible hands. For years, speculation ran wild. Some imagined supernatural forces or spirits moving the stones under the cover of night, while others whispered of alien activity or otherworldly intervention. These ideas added an element of magic and mystery to the desert, turning the playa into a place of legends. The stones became storytellers, their trails serving as silent records of events that occurred when no human eyes were watching over time. Scientific investigation began to unravel the mystery, revealing the incredible subtlety of natural forces. Researchers discovered that the movement of the stones depends on a rare combination of ice, water, and wind. During the cold desert nights of winter, a thin layer of water sometimes accumulates across the playa, freezing into delicate sheets of ice. When sunlight warms the ice the following day, it begins to crack and break into panels. These ice panels, floating gently on the wet mud, can nudge rocks along the surface even with very light winds. The stones glide slowly, almost imperceptibly, but over time they create the long, distinct trails that have baffled humans for generations. This phenomenon is a perfect example of how even the most ordinary objects can be moved by extraordinary circumstances, and how nature can create wonder in places that seem harsh and lifeless. What makes the moving stones even more fascinating is the secrecy of their motion. No one has ever witnessed a rock in full glide. Instead, observers only see the evidence left behind. The playa itself becomes a stage where nature performs in silence, leaving tracks that hint at the performance but reveal nothing of the process in real time. It is this element of hidden movement that gives the racetrack Playa its sense of magic. Standing among the stones, looking at the trails stretching across the cracked mud, it is easy to imagine the quiet, deliberate paths of the rocks, and to feel the presence of forces beyond immediate perception. The mystery teaches patience, observation, and curiosity, reminding everyone who visits that not all wonders announce themselves loudly. Some unfold slowly, subtly, and almost invisibly, rewarding those who take the time to notice. The trails themselves are captivating. Each one tells a story of direction, force, and time. Some stones glide in straight, uninterrupted paths, while others turn, curve, or meander across the surface, leaving unique patterns behind. The variation in trails is influenced by the size and shape of the stone, the slope of the ground, and the subtle shifts of ice and wind. Looking at these trails allows the mind to trace the journey of each rock, imagining the quiet movement and gentle nudges that carried it across the desert. They are a reminder that nature's wonders do not always happen with grandeur or noise, but often in subtle, graceful motions that leave behind evidence for those who are paying attention. The moving stones of Death Valley also inspire reflection and creativity. They encourage us to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to appreciate patience, and to embrace curiosity. They are a reminder that the world is full of secrets, rhythms, and processes that can surprise and delight, even in the most unlikely places. Scientists, travelers, and dreamers alike are drawn to the racetrack Playa to witness the stone's trails, to ponder the forces at work, and to marvel at the delicate balance that allows such a phenomenon to occur. In this way, the moving stones are more than just a geological curiosity. They are a symbol of wonder, patience, and the hidden magic of the natural world, teaching that even in a dry, harsh desert, extraordinary things can happen without notice, leaving behind traces that inspire awe and imagination.